Hey guys, it's TheFrXion here, Tank12, have you call me? I don't really care. Welcome back to World of Tanks. We're today taking a look at the WZ-114, which is a Tier 9 Chinese heavy tank, and it's a premium at that. It's supposed to be this year's tank marathon vehicle for February, on the Chinese server at least, but it also could be coming to the North American and European server because we're going to have a tank marathon as well at the same time. The question is just, are they going to sell us another tier 9 premium heavy tank, or is it going to be the tier 8 version that they initially first had it as? But I think since they changed the characteristics and made it a tier 9, I think it's going to be coming out as a tier 9. So yeah, I think most of us would have been naive to think that the Slitswagen K was going to be the only Tier 9 premium. I thought it was just going to be the beginning of a lot of Tier 9 premiums coming to the game, and the WZ-114 is going to be probably a testament to that. It's going to be the second one. We're going to take a look at the characteristics. We're going to talk about the vehicle itself, take a few peeks at the tank, and then we're going to have a little bit of a discussion on Tier 9 premium tanks and why it's still a bad idea. But let's first take a look at some of the pictures right here and make them a bit bigger. This is the WZ-114. It's a heavy tank. It looks rather slim for a heavy, but it's quite long, to be fair. It looks quite interesting. Doesn't seem to be like as much the same look as some other Chinese heavy tanks. It doesn't have the width, the very big kind of size on the, you know, on the width of the vehicle. It's quite long though, so it kind of goes into that direction. And also, it has a turret that is a bit bigger, a bit taller instead of flat. So at first, you can see they had some side skirts. It looks quite compact. So doesn't seem like a heavy tank that is extremely big. Looks like it's a heavy tank that you could fit in several places where it doesn't take up too much space. Seems more like a mix of a medium tank with a heavy more than anything else. And what I think is quite interesting here is that the turret is quite large. It's something that you are not used to when you're playing like Soviet and Chinese tanks. The turrets usually aren't that big. They're very big. They're very tall right here. There's a lot of space where you can actually shoot at the tank from the rear and the side, and that's going to be quite interesting to see how strong this tank is going to be. So let's take a look at the gun. You have a 130 millimeter gun, which has 530 alpha damage. That is quite a lot for a tier 9 heavy tank. 530 with the heat shell, and the armor penetration is all the way up to 266 millimeters with the AP shell, 311 with the heat shell, and 65 with the high explosive shell. So yeah, this thing really packs a punch, but it does not have really good reload stats. Does take quite a long time to reload this tank, 17 seconds. Now that is probably with the just the base tank without any kind of crew skills on there, so you can probably get it down to maybe 13 seconds if everything goes to plan. Aim time is quite atrocious, 3.6 seconds, but the dispersion, the accuracy is actually not too bad, 0.33. And gun depression and the elevation, something very, very unique to Chinese tanks. 10 degrees of gun depression is really great. That's something you really don't have on Chinese tanks or Soviet tanks. 10 degrees, that's a lot of gun depression. And I'm just asking, I'm kind of thinking, is this going to be a ridgeline tank, another hull down vehicle? It does have a very big weak spot, like this cupola at the top, so it does seem to be quite easy to penetrate that thing. But still, we're going to have to talk about the armor in just a second, because there are certain numbers that do scare me a little bit when I'm looking at this tank. So 10 degrees of gun depression, that's really, really great. 20 degrees of gun elevation, that's also not too bad. You have 33 kilometers per hour top speed, which is atrocious. It's quite bad. The power to weight ratio is terrible as well. So this is more supposed to be like a real heavy tank without any of the mobility. You don't have any hull traverse speed, don't have any turret traverse speed. Your power on the vehicle itself is quite atrocious. Your reverse speed is terrible as well. So this tank kind of doesn't really fit into the meta very well, because the meta is basically kind of good armored with good mobility and a very high DPM, and it doesn't really fit into that role, or at least having an autoloader doesn't seem to be that kind of vehicle. So at least we can already say that it's not going to be one of those meta tanks, but it's going to be quite interesting because it's one of the old school heavy tanks, at least from the mobility stats and the armor stats. It also kind of goes into the same direction. You have 140 millimeters at the front, 60 on the side, 60 at the rear, so there's not a lot of armor there, and it looks quite flat. Lower plate looks very big, very easy, juicy target, and the upper plate looks angled nice enough to probably bounce quite a couple of standard rounds, but if you start slinging the gold rounds, it seems to be that it's not going to be withstanding a lot. We still have to figure out and try out the vehicle in the game once it's there, but it doesn't seem to be that bad. It does have 2,300 hit points though. That is a lot for a tier 9 tank. It's on par with about the E75 or the Moistion. So that's the base HP level. So you'll have a lot of HP to trade with. The turret armor, on the other hand, is really good. 300 millimeters at the front and 175 on the side and 95 at the rear. To be fair, it looks less armored. I have the feeling that it looks like a little bit like a turret that is very easily penetratable, but since you have that cupola up top, I think you might be able to work against this tank when it's on a ridgeline. Still, 300 millimeters of hull turret armor at the front is going to be quite a hassle for us, but I think it's doable and we can probably deal with this tank if we have to. What I really don't like though is that it has 390 meters view range, which is quite a lot for a Chinese tier 9 heavy tank. Usually that is absolutely not the case on tier 9 heavy tanks to have 390 meters view range. With this one you have really decent view range. 390 meters is really great for a Chinese tier 9 heavy tank. So all in all, it looks like a tank that has a really hard hitting gun that loads really slowly, doesn't have the best aim time, but you have 10 degrees of gun depression, which is really nice. We don't know about the shell velocity of the AP shell here. Let me just check if there's anything down here, but doesn't look like it has any information regarding the shell velocity. You have heat shells, which is obviously always going to be a plus to take on those really heavily armored vehicles that are really flat. The mobility is very lackluster, at least from the stats. It seems to be a very slow tank. And survivability, on the other hand, looks like quite decent. It doesn't look too bad. So it looks like a decent kind of tank that is not overpowered, at least in the mobility department. So it has like its drawbacks. It's a heavy tank. It's a classic heavy. And survivability wise, we have to figure out how the armor works and how good the armor is on the turret, because with the cupola on top, it seems to me that it has a weak spot, at least on the turret as well. Even though it is 300 millimeters thick, there could be something that you can work with if you have to engage this tank. So all in all, it doesn't seem to be that terrible, and that kind of points it towards the direction that it could be the next tank marathon vehicle, because Wargaming usually choose tanks that are kind of balanced, and they don't want to, get hammered away when they start bringing out tier 9 premium tanks. With extremely powerful vehicles, they usually get a lot better as soon as they kind of finished the first batch that aren't as good, and then they kind of power creep them. That's how they've done it with the tier 8s. But still, I don't think it's a great idea to have tier 9 premium tanks, because generally speaking, you want your players to reach tier 9 not by playing by playing the game, but not by buying themselves into tier 9 and just getting a kind of a WZ114 out of the get-go. I know it's kind of hypocritical, because you can buy with bonds tier 10 tanks, tier 9 tanks. With the battle pass system, you could get tier 9 vehicles, and I don't like that system. I don't like that players that maybe do not have the experience can immediately go to tier 9 and roll around with tier 9, tier 10 tanks, because that is a big step up from tier 7, tier 6, and tier 8. It's a very different world, and these players will get frustrated. They will probably not play very well, and that will frustrate them, and it will probably not help out the team either. So that's just my kind of my take on that. But as always, tell me what you think in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Until then, have a good one.